Alright everybody, thank you for joining me once again. Today we're dealing with Thomas DeLauer and one of his more recent videos which purports to be about the difference between tea and coffee as that relates to longevity. Green tea and coffee, that is, of course. The problem, or one of the problems, before we get going with Thomas and the kind of videos that he makes in this regard, is that unfortunately neither Thomas nor apparently whoever it is he's getting so-called scientific advice from is actually up to snuff in that regard. What I can suggest to you, Thomas, is whoever it is that you are getting advice from ought to be sacked. And you probably ought to take someone like myself on to give you advice on these videos because, frankly, son, not too impressive, I'm afraid. So let's deal with your video about green tea, coffee and longevity in our usual point-wise fashion. And yeah, when we're done, hopefully people will have gained a great deal more understanding of science and its process and the way we should communicate in a disciplined and indicated fashion about science, etc. So Thomas, all yours, son. Off you go.
It's kind of fun. On one side you have coffee people, the other side you have green tea people, and it's like they like to fight each other. Which one is better and which one is worse, and they all pick on each other. And when it comes down to longevity and looking at the research, we have to look at large observational data. I love mechanisms, I really do, but when it comes down to lifespan, longevity, we can't lean on mechanistic stuff.
Okay, so what Thomas is alluding to there is the age-old problem in science as that relates to the human lifespan, the human health span over multiple decades, and any aspect of human nutrition, exercise, supplementation of any kind. Here is the issue. Mechanistic studies, which are well-controlled, well-disciplined, metabolic ward lock-in nature, properly observed, properly disciplined science of an experimental nature, invariably has a tenure, a span of people being studied under observation and control, ranging between 0 minutes and seconds and several weeks at the longest. Most studies exert no control and observation over their subject pools. The subjects are allowed to go and live under their own reconnaissance, out of the prying eye, if you like, of the researcher. The researcher has no idea what, in fact, the people really genuinely did do whatsoever, which is a very, very serious problem. Studies that do go for several weeks where people are actually locked in laboratories, fine. But then we can extend those studies, if they were in fact properly disciplined and observed and it was all done under lock and key properly, we can only extrapolate the findings of those studies for the period of time that those people were observed properly in a laboratory. Goodness. So if that's several weeks, that's all you can say about the outcomes. You cannot predict forward, you cannot extrapolate a study beyond its tenure. So we go to long-term studies, so-called, which are even less disciplined, even less controlled, and even less observed. They are large-scale studies of a large number of individuals who usually are self-reported respondents who respond to questions on a questionnaire, mostly without any truth whatsoever to speak of behind the way they actually do respond to when asked questions about what they are eating, etc. Or indeed they get it wrong because they can't even remember. There's no control of confounds, covariates, collinearities of any kind. And then what the researchers do is they take the outcome results of these studies, so-called studies, and they crumple them up and throw them over their right shoulder into the ash can and make up some different ones to suit themselves on the basis of a procedure called multiple variate regression, on the false belief, an assumption, I guess, that multivariate regression is capable of partitioning out causality or partial causality, which it is not. A multivariate regression is no more able to inform on causality than a single variate regression is, actually. So what we're basically saying is there is no science to underpin a claim regarding long-term benefits or detriments of eating or drinking tea, green or otherwise, coffee, caffeinated or otherwise, or not, as that results or relates, I should say, to longevity, lifespan, or indeed health span in any way. That is where Thomas is falling down here, because he's going to repeatedly use the word risk. Risk, risk, risk. This study informs on risk, he's going to say repeatedly. No, Thomas. None of these retrospective cohort studies are able to inform on any given individual person's risk of anything whatsoever. You've been fooled, or at least your so-called scientific advisor has been fooled, and as such you ought to fire that person this week, Thomas, and get in touch with me for a discussion about who it is you should be listening to for scientific advice before you make these videos, which frankly, son, make you look a little bit silly. Okay? So, carry on.
Okay, so let's look at observational data on what is better.
Observational data? There isn't any, Thomas. Looking at what people say on a survey when you ask them questions about how much tea or coffee they've been drinking is not observation at all. Sorry about that.
Green tea or coffee, because surprisingly, they're eerily close in terms of the benefits.
That's true of most retrospective cohort study epidemiological type works in human nutrition, Thomas. It's because the actual influence of any of the things typically looked at is so small as to be completely swamped by signal-to-noise ratio. While you get statistically significant differences between subgroups and various aspects of things, that is because many of these studies have multiple million person-years of follow-up, and a very, very large sample size can show a very, very minute output signal to be statistically unlikely to have occurred due to dumb chance alone. I know that's parsimonious, but we'll move on anyway. Okay? None of these things are useful to any one given living human being, not over a 100-year lifespan. And we'll get to that in a minute. So, off you go.
But we have to understand some of the nuance so that we can start to...
Yes, Thomas, nuance is a great thing to understand in science, and that's why you should have a scientific advisor who does understand nuance, unlike the one you currently have who does not, clearly. Okay?
Extrapolate some hypothetical reasons as to why, so that we can figure out what's best for us.
All right, so guessing. Speculation about what's best for you based on no information to actually gauge what's best for you. Brilliant.
After today's video, check out, I don't care if you like coffee or green tea, they have options for both. So you can save 30% off your entire grocery order. Or if you don't like coffee or tea at all, there's a million other things. But the whole point is making it so you don't have to go to the grocery store. And a lot of the items there are cheaper through than they are at the grocery store, not to mention how much you're probably spending in gas right now. So big thank you to them for their support on this channel, and that link down below saves you 30% off your grocery order plus a $50 free gift down below in the description in the top line. Let's first...
Great, okay, that's the bills paid. Fantastic.
Let's look at a study published in JAMA on green tea.
The study talks about green tea consumption. Well, Thomas, did the authors of this study lock how many? 40,530 people into a laboratory for 11 years and observe how much tea they drank, every other factor in their life controlled strictly. Is that what happened in this study? No? So this study informs on cause and effect in exactly not one jot. All sorts of covariates, confounds, collinearities may exist which would render this finding, even if it was meaningful, which it isn't, as totally invalid as a cause and effect inference or anything that should be taken remotely seriously by any given living human being. Furthermore, if we look at the cohort here, you will find that it is Japanese adults. So this study cannot be extrapolated to people who are not Japanese. It's also adults between the ages of 40 to 79 years at the outset. So they've had somewhere between 40 and 79 years of impacts to their longevity and their health span through other factors they've undertaken in their life. Ergo, what are we looking at here, Thomas? Were they genetically identical, these cohorts of people consuming different amounts of green tea in this case? No. This isn't science, Thomas. This is nonsense. This is propaganda, spin doctory, smoke and mirrors. This is something for these authors to write about and get published so that they can write it down on their CVs as a publication. This is of no utility to anybody under any circumstances. Not to mention the fact that the actual differences between groups in terms of outcomes was so close to zero as makes no odds to any one given human being living anywhere in the world, Japan or anywhere else, anyway. Okay? This is just ridiculous nonsense, Thomas. This is not worth your time or mine, really, other than as an educational opportunity for my people to understand how hugely ridiculous this form of anti-scientific crackpottery known as nutritional epidemiology really is. It's absolutely shocking and appalling how poor this stuff is. And it's time we woke up to it. Well, I'm already awake. It's time you woke up to it, Thomas. Okay?
11-year study taking a look at 40,000 Japanese people.
No, not looking at them at all, actually. Leaving them to go and live their lives and following up with them 11 years later to see how many of them are dead or have various different disease processes or not. So not looking at anything at all, actually.
They found that those that consumed 5 or more cups of green tea per day had significantly...
That means statistically significant, which when you have 40,500 people followed for 11 years, you've got probably around about 500,000 person years of follow-up there. So a very, very small effect is statistically significant, but it's not until you have 5 cups a day that that's even statistical, let alone of actual any utility to anybody. I mean, what happens if you drink 4 cups a day? Does that mean nothing happens? Well, given that the study can't inform on cause and effect in any way anyhow, what are we looking at here, Thomas? What is the point of this? What are you trying to get across here, except another excuse to make another video, to get some watch time and to make some money off your advertisers? Because there's nothing of utility here whatsoever.
Lower risk of...
No, not risk. This study is a retrospective, incidence-based, adjusted, so in other words, fabricated outcome study. This study is incapable of informing on cause and effect, risk, protection, likelihood of incidence of any kind for any given individual living anywhere in the world, any time, past, future, present, or anywhere. It's just nonsense, Thomas. Absolute nonsense, and you've been fooled. Okay? This is why people without a scientific background should not be talking about the peer-reviewed literature in public videos on YouTube, because you do not have the skills to read and interpret these papers competently with a correct critical view on what these papers are capable of and not. Okay, you are out of your depth and out of your lane, and your so-called scientific advisor, whoever that might be, is similarly out of their depth. Clearly. Okay?
All-cause mortality. For all-cause mortality, it was 23%.
I'm actually quite concerned, Thomas. Really genuinely concerned for you. I think you and I really do need to have a chat very, very seriously, very, very soon. Okay, enough said.
Reduction for women and a 12% reduction for men. Now this means throughout all...
Okay, 22% reduction in what, Thomas? And 22% of what? What was the baseline rate of mortality in the so-called control group, i.e. those who consumed no green tea at all? How often did those people die? You didn't actually give us any opportunity in splashing that paper up on the screen there to make that assessment. Now, I could go and look for that paper and find it myself and get the answer if I could be bothered, but I can't, because I'll tell you what the answer is likely to be. In all of these kind of studies, typically the baseline death rate is around about 8 per 10,000 person years of follow-up. So even if the difference, the statistically significant difference of 20%, even if that was a cause and effect relationship due entirely to the consumption of tea, as reported by these people, what does that mean in practice? It's not causal, so this means nothing, but even if it was, what would it mean? Here's what it would mean. The difference would be 16 deaths per 100,000 person years of follow-up. Now, divide that enough times that you get the signal for an individual, if it was applicable to each individual, which it isn't anyway, down to a 100-year lifespan, because the number I've just given you is based on 100,000 years. Okay? So you need to divide that by 10,000 to get the actual difference in death rates here. Okay? Hello? This is not difficult mathematics to grasp, and calling this a 20% difference is disingenuous at best and downright dishonest, actually, in reality, isn't it? These authors have hugely, grossly, vastly inflated the power and meaning of their so-called outcomes to make their work in the so-called scientific literature look so much more important than it really is, haven't they? Okay? That's what you'll find in all of these studies. None of them are worth the paper they're written on, Thomas. None of them can inform in any way on risk, protection, likelihood of an outcome of any kind, or cause and effect in any way, shape, or form. Wow, by the way. Really concerned. Genuinely, Thomas. Please get in touch with me. Okay? I can help.
All risks of death throughout all kinds of different...
No, not risks of death. These studies are incapable of informing on any one individual person's risk of anything, death included. So no, Thomas, false.
Continuums. This was the overall risk. So almost...
No, not risk. Still.
25%.
No. Not at all. I've just done the math for you to show you what it really was likely to have been. Nothing anywhere near a number that you should describe as 25%. Totally disingenuous, dishonest, actually.
Women. Okay, then when we look at cardiovascular disease risk...
No, still not risk. Still an associative retrospective study that didn't even report what actually was observed because it was adjusted. In other words, fabricated. So no.
There was a huge benefit direct...
No, benefit is a cause and effect statement, Thomas. No, son. Wrong. Wow. It's really sad, isn't it, kids?
In that specific silo, too. 31% for women and 22% for men. But then, going further down the line...
Yeah, it's still nothing based on the math I've just shown you. You work the numbers out for yourself. Nothing to see here, Thomas, at all.
Another huge cause of death, stroke. And there was a big reduction in stroke risk.
No, there wasn't, Thomas. Do the math. There was no such thing. No.
42% for women, 35% reduction.
Okay, that's still nothing. Nothing at all, Thomas, to any given living human being over a 100-year follow-up period. No.
For men. I want to get one thing out in the open first. We see in a lot of this observational research that women tend to respond better to things than...
Women tend to respond better to everything in the universe, Thomas. It's the law of the universe. Women are great, and men are just awful, basically. So, suck it up.
Men. Okay. Much of the conclusion behind that, or the theory, is that women are smaller. Okay, and that...
All right, so smaller animals live longer than bigger animals, do they, Thomas? That's interesting, because they don't. So that's a great theory. Any substance to it? No. Okay, let's move on.
Means less overall just weight and mass, and just from a simple energy dynamics standpoint, there's less overall turnover, and that might be why women live longer in the first place. Maybe,
and maybe not too. That's the great thing about the word might or maybe or possibly. Leaves the other thing entirely on the table. Complete speculation, of no value to us, Thomas. Please, son, come on.
Smaller. Other theories are menstruation actually changed things, where how much they're dumping in the way of potential oxidative stressors, how much they're...
but apparently men can menstruate too, Thomas. And there are 168 different genders, I'm told. I wonder if attack helicopter is an accepted gender, in which case it's 169 as far as I'm concerned. Who am I to say that's not a gender?
They're dumping in the way of iron, which actually might be a problem if you have a buildup of iron.
Yes, but most people don't.
I'm not an expert in that world, but
What field are you an expert in, Thomas? Marketing, perhaps. Presenting videos in a way that people find appealing and affable, perhaps. But being correct and scientifically valid about anything you've had to say on pretty much any topic, not so much. It's a real shame. You really could do a lot better, and I can help. I'd like to help, Thomas. I'd like to be able to stop making these critiques of you, because every video of yours I watch is worse than the one I've seen before in terms of its quality. What are you doing? Let's move on.
I know that people are probably wondering if they're curious-minded. Anyhow, putting that aside, what the heck is going on? Why is green tea so advantageous for longevity?
There is no indication that it is, Thomas. We've covered that. None at all.
Much of it has to do with the simple polyphenols.
Okay, so a mechanistic speculation underpinned by exactly zero science of any kind. Why?
We can really lean in this a lot. On one hand, polyphenols, antioxidants are great, but on the other hand, shouldn't we be getting our antioxidants endogenously from stress and fasting and working out? Yes and yes, right? They both are good.
Also, complete speculations, all of them. Okay.
Good. And usually where antioxidants come into benefit is with older people or people...
Again, benefit's a cause and effect statement, Thomas. Do you have any science to underpin any claim of benefit? No, okay.
That might have some dysregulation in their ability to...
Is a word, like one of those words, might not to
produce endogenous antioxidants. And there's no real way for you to know that. You don't always...
Well, there is, in fact, actually, Thomas. We can measure how much of the endogenous protein-based antioxidant suite of things that a human body produces. We can get in there and do lab testing and find out. Okay? If we really want to know
if something is inherently wrong at that level, right?
Or do some lab testing and we can find out, yes.
So having a little bit of green tea could help. Now,
and maybe not too.
Interesting theory. And there was another study that took a look at over 40,000 Japanese individuals.
Okay, so another study that can only be extrapolated to Japanese individuals, and only Japanese individuals aged at 40 years of age or more from the outset. Okay, yeah, good.
Found that people that consume green tea...
You mean people that reported consuming green tea, not people that were actually observed so doing?
Or 5+ cups a day, again, have lower levels of distress in their lives.
Okay, so how in the purple FAQ was that determined? Stress, distress. By the way, they're not the same thing, Thomas. You've used the words interchangeably there. It's stress and distress. Which was it? Was it stress or distress? And how was that determined scientifically and operationally defined and measured exactly? Should we wait for that? I think perhaps not.
And we're talking like 20% less stress.
On what scale? Measured how?
So we do have to factor this in too, right?
Why? Because you haven't provided us any reason to factor anything in so far, Thomas, whatsoever.
Theanine that's in green tea
So we're going to guess again, another mechanistic speculation. Okay, yeah, what about it?
Seems to have powerful, powerful effects at stress modulation.
Really? Measured how?
And I hate to sound cliche because that's
Do you?
everything I don't want this channel to be, but stress is a huge driver of ROS, reactive oxygen species, and just
No, that's distress. Usually that when it gets out of control, that's a different thing from stress.
damage, DNA damage within the body. Okay, whether it's too much physical stress or too much mental stress or whatever. So maybe that's where things are kind of going with this.
And maybe not too. Remember, that's the great thing about those words. But possibly, maybe, could be words.
Now, what else is interesting surrounding green tea is there's physical benefits that come with it.
Such as?
And when you look at different scales in the way we measure biometrics and aging and biological clocks, one of the emerging ways to look at a biological clock is actually the skin wrinkles near the eyes.
Really, Thomas? Is that so?
So there is actually up and coming research.
Okay then.
Being poured into this, where they can actually algorithmically look at your face and tell your biological age compared to your chronological age based upon wrinkles near your eyes.
No.
Why am I mentioning this? Because there's some evidence that green tea stops collagen breakdown.
So does having sufficient collagen in the right format in your diet and the right controls over your lifestyle in other ways so as to minimize the negative effects of your inflammasome, your endocrine system, your hormonal systems, all of those kind of things. They're all pretty helpful in that regard too. Probably much more than some plant-based extract, some bunch of stuff steeped out of some green leaves that have been dried and then put under boiling water for a bit. Also, do you want to talk about the potential for toxicity of that, being a plant material and such? No? Okay.
Now it does this because it suppresses something called MMP3. Now MMP3...
Well, that's a speculation. Again, that is a mechanistic speculation, Thomas. Show us the science that backs this up, that it occurs in vivo in free-living human beings. No? Again? Okay.
As we get older, accumulates, and it encourages collagen degradation. Okay, we start to break down some of the collagen because we need amino acids going into the labral pool for whatever reason, because of the ratio of muscle protein breakdown to synthesis.
It's often, mostly, Thomas, because people's diets are all out of whack and are all species inappropriate, non-specific, and not consistent with our genetic gift and our ancestral diet. That's what causes this distress often, and the imbalances that lead a human body to start breaking itself down. Okay?
Synthesis changes as we age.
Nothing to do with drinking green tea or not, pretty much.
If we support and maintain collagen in the skin, then that is, in theory,
I suggest that people support and maintain the collagen in their bodies with a really quite superb collagen peptide supplement available from the kind folk at Cerule. You can get it through myself at the link at the bottom of the screen right now. It really is the most outstanding collagen product available anywhere on the market. Or you can throw the dice and try your luck at having the best diet you possibly can, which might get you close to slowing down that aging process, but I don't think it will achieve it, frankly. I would suggest that you can live a long and happy life without any supplementation of any kind. However, there are a number of supplements that you might choose to take into your body on the advice of someone actually educated in this area, such as myself, that would be likely to lead to an improvement over and above what the carnivore diet can achieve. The carnivore diet is fantastic, but it is not the answer by itself. Additional optional supplementation of a nutraceutical nature can be very, very handy. Check it out. There are also business opportunities available to assist in the marketing of cereal products for commission if you'd be interested in earning some money. Let me know. The contact details are at the bottom of the screen. Right, that's my bills paid. Let's carry on.
Affecting our biological age. It's also preserving proteins. So, although it may not have a metabolic impact on longevity that we can attribute directly to,
May not, yes, good.
we can't say, oh, well, maybe you're maintaining collagen, the skin's doing better,
And maybe not too, yes.
the tendons and ligaments are doing better, maybe you're less frail, you're
And maybe not.
able to remain active for long. We can get nuancy there. It's very interesting.
We could, or we could just stick to the science, Thomas. That'd be great. But perhaps before you can do that, you need to fire your current advisor and hire a better one. I'm available.
So let's jump into coffee though, because this study looked at over 402,000 people over the course of 13 years.
Right, so what have we got there? 402 times 13, ooh, millions of years of follow-up. So a very, very small so-called effect will be statistically significant without actually being of utility still. But let's see.
So it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it found that once again, coffee was something that really helped with...
Now, helped is a cause and effect statement, Thomas. It was associated with the reports on people telling people how much coffee they've been drinking was associated with an outcome once it had been adjusted, i.e. fabricated, so of no value anyway. And there's no cause and effect artifact here because of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of completely uncontrolled degrees of freedom, covariates, confounds, collinearities, that render this finding of no value whatever in discussing cause, effect, likelihood, risk, hazard, or any of these things regarding any outcome of any kind. Not science. Thomas, nonsense.
with overall longevity. It helped when you look at
No, helped as cause and effect. Still, no.
all-cause mortality. There was significantly
Yeah, statistically, but again, what was the actual difference? And if we look at these numbers here, you will find the 95% confidence intervals for women span 1, ergo signal to noise ratio no good, statistically significant or not, no value there whatsoever. And for men, just looking for it. I can't see anything about men at all. All right. Okay. There it is. It's above that, but it's highlighted. That spans 1 as well. Thomas, son, seriously, fire your scientific advisor. Do that today. Contact me by email. I know you have my email address because we've had a number of exchanges via email already, Thomas, haven't we, son? It is time you got someone on board who is competent to help you not make these errors. This makes you look a fool. You need to stop doing this today. Oh, my word. Seriously?
less risk of all-cause
No, not risk.
mortality in subjects that drank, hear this, 4 to 5 cups of coffee per day.
I'll tell you what else is associated with what else too, Thomas, just for fun. Did you know that the sale of ice creams at Miami Beach correlates very highly with the incidence of sunburn reported to the first aid people at Miami Beach? Ergo, what we should do to avoid sunburn? Yep, we should outlaw ice cream, shouldn't we? Seriously, son, come on.
Now with this, there was a 12% improvement or reduction in all-cause mortality for men.
12% of what, Thomas? What was the baseline? Probably 8 per 10,000. That leaves the difference being 8 per 100,000 person years. Divide that by 10,000 to get the change in incidence for any one person, if it was causal, which it isn't, over a 100-year lifespan, Thomas. It's worth nothing. You might as well call that zero, because that's what it is. There is no difference to speak of, and the confidence interval spans 1 anyway. Signal-to-noise ratio, worthless. This isn't difficult. If you have just a few clues, more than about 3 brain cells, and more than 6 months exposure to maybe an undergraduate course in statistical inference, Thomas. I have 25 years experience as a statistician in my own right. Okay? Goodness gracious. Ridiculous.
Men and a 16% reduction for women. Still higher for women, not as high as green tea though. So what is going on here?
Absolutely nothing, Thomas. Not a damn thing. Zilt. Zip.
Coffee not as good as green tea? It's a give and a take.
No, it isn't. Neither study informs in any way on cause and effect relationships between tea, coffee, longevity, health span, lifespan, or anything else. They are both utter nonsense.
Okay, because coffee has similar polyphenols that work on...
Okay, so mechanistic speculation again. Seriously, son. This is getting beyond a joke.
Different directives than maybe the green tea does. So we could get, again, really granular with that, or we could...
No, we can't, because there is nothing upon which to base any granularity of any kind of analysis. There is nothing here that will inform us in any way that is of any utility to anybody ever. Goodness gracious.
Could look at larger scale stuff. One of the things that we've seen in rodent model studies...
Oh, well, next time I'm talking to a rodent, I'll make sure I tell them about the study you're about to tell us about. Because rodents are absolutely physiologically identical to human beings, aren't they, Thomas? Wow. Wow. Not often I'm lost for words.
Is that coffee is a very potent and quick driver of autophagy.
In rats, yes.
Okay, so autophagy is the cellular recycling. And this is like if you have your living room and it's totally full of boxes and stuff like that and you can't see the TV, well, imagine sort of autophagy as collapsing those boxes and folding them up so now you can see the TV, right? You're consolidating, you're getting rid of a lot of the useless matter and compressing it and using it even as fuel. So coffee drives this process, at least in mice.
Right, well, mice, not even rats, mice. I hate mices to pieces. Suffer and succotash.
Now, full disclaimer, exercise is the most potent driver of autophagy, so I don't think...
Not so, actually, Thomas, not so at all. False again.
You should sit here worrying about counting your autophagic flux and counting the foods that trigger autophagy when you could just go out and run for 30 minutes. But during the time that you're not exercising, this is important. Now, what's wild is there is a study that was published in the journal Cell Cycle.
Is that a scientific descriptor? Wild?
That found that both decaf and regular caffeinated coffee have very similar effects when it comes down to autophagy.
Not effects, because that's the conjugate of cause, and there is no study which can inform us on cause and effect with regard to coffee, be it caffeinated or otherwise, on human heart health outcomes or longevity in any way. Still.
Now, there's not enough observational data to say, okay, 400,000 people that only drank decaf had the same effects as 400,000
Not effects, that's the conjugate of cause. Remember, Thomas? Still.
people that only drank caffeinated coffee. But we can sort of theorize.
Or we could not bother because you're not qualified to do so, Thomas. And neither is your scientific advisor, as I think I've made very clear. Whoever that is. Time for a new one, still.
That maybe the reduction in benefit
maybe not too.
From coffee versus green tea has to do with the high amounts of caffeine, because
yeah, and maybe not. Good.
4 or 5 cups of coffee is going to be a lot of caffeine.
Or not, depending on how much caffeine is in the coffee you're drinking, depending on the way in which it's prepared, Thomas.
And that could start to impact sleep. And
that could, see that, could, maybe not too. Yep.
That could definitely impact longevity.
And could definitely not too, still.
Scores. But one of the most important things, I hope you're still in this video, is the inhibition of mTOR with coffee.
Oh, God, really? So now you're going to throw some reductionist nonsense in as well, just to absolutely make it clear and patent to anyone who didn't quite get it yet how totally vacuous you are, Thomas, in this regard. Okay.
I haven't seen any studies that demonstrate that green tea inhibits mTOR.
That's because there aren't any.
Okay, so coffee being an mTOR inhibitor means that it is stopping the growth cycle.
No, it doesn't mean any such thing. Too many leaps of faith there, Thomas. Vastly.
Sounds bad at first, but when you look at almost all the longevity research, it all points towards attenuation of mTOR or less.
No, that's all mechanistic speculation of a reductionist nature, undertaken mostly by charlatans, headed by the king of the reductionist charlatans, David Sinclair, who really is a buffoon, a charlatan, and a fool of the highest order, with a very, very serious ego problem, in fact. That's for another day.
Less mTOR equals longer living.
No, it doesn't, Thomas. Again, that's a complete leap of faith without any backing whatsoever in science. No, son.
But there's also a downside to that. Where is the balance? Because you want to have enough mTOR to stimulate muscle growth, because more muscle means more ability to store glucose, to deal with nutrients.
There's an optimal level of muscularity, Thomas. There's such a thing as undermuscled and overmuscled, both of which are likely to be problematic. Okay?
And to not be overweight. But at the same time...
Well, in fact, if you're talking about weight, Thomas, muscle is vastly more heavy than any of the other tissues per square centimetre of it, or cubic centimetre of it, or inch if you like. So weight, if you're overly muscled, your weight, well, you'll be overweight as per a weight calculation if that's the only information someone's got. Goodness gracious, this is appalling.
If you're not sort of blocking mTOR now and then, it's not going to do you a lot of good. So here's my suggestion for that.
Well, that's a guess too, isn't it, Thomas? Another complete guess.
When you are not eating and you are really trying to drive autophagy, maybe when you're fasting or just purely not eating.
That's what not eating means. Fasting, not eating, it's the same thing, Thomas.
That's the time to drink coffee.
No, it isn't. God's sake.
When you are eating meals and things like that, you're already spiking mTOR. So no sense in drinking coffee that can blunt mTOR at that point. You might as well ride that mTOR wave the best that you can for consolidation and growth.
Total guess. Since when are you an expert in mTOR and its implications health-wise, short, medium, or long-term, Thomas? Since when?
But not really blunt it with coffee. So
you've said that, and it's a guess. It's an ignorant guess, Thomas.
At the end of the day, if you ask me based on observational data...
Why would we ask you, Thomas? What is your credentials? What are your skills in science, physiology, health, longevity, mTOR, caffeine, or green tea? None. None at all. You're a popular YouTube personality with no credentials in this field. Why would we ask you?
data, I think green tea is marginally better.
Well, so that's your opinion. Your vacuous opinion. My word.
Okay, and I don't think that comes as any crazy surprise, but the data is just a little more concrete with the polyphenols.
No, it isn't. Wrong again. No.
The theanine and the lower caffeine content.
No.
As always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you.
No. Not until Thomas fires whoever it is he's getting advice from and hires someone competent. Again, Thomas, you have my email address. We can sort this out. You can stop looking like a fool from tomorrow if you want to. For the right price, of course. Anyway, the rest of you, you know the drill. Don't let the door hit you in the backside on the way out. Clean the room up after you. Don't leave your mess behind for the next person. See you next time when someone else will be wrong on interwebs, because there really is a lot of that going on, isn't there? See you then.